Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. This is part 5 of the Salat series, centered around the concept of Sujud and its relation with Salat. In part 1 of this series, we explained the intent of the series and the tools and analysis approach. In part 2, we went over the traditional understanding of Salat and Zakat. Based on our observations of Ruku in Quran, we noted that the probable connotations of Ruku are accepting one's weakness or error, humbling oneself to Allah, changing direction towards Allah. In part 3, we noted that the probable connotations for Zakat are reaching full potential, nurturing purification, increasing in knowledge and wisdom. In part 4, we noted that the probable connotations for Salat are the process to join, connect with the Sabil of Allah, closely following the Quran, ayat, and reform, correct. Please note that we are building on these observations and concepts as we proceed in this series. Please watch this series in sequence for a better understanding. This series is a study of some key concepts, namely Salat, Zakat, Ruku, and Sujud. Today, we will primarily look at the concept of Sujud in Quran, but we will encounter the other concepts as they are related. We will start with a few investigation points to keep in mind as we go through this part and the whole series. In Quran, what is the purpose or essence of Sujud? What is the relationship of Salat and Sujud? Is Sujud prescribed as a physical prostration, part of a physical ritual? Is Sujud putting one's forehead on the ground? Please note that we may not have concrete answers to all of these questions today. Our understanding will evolve as we go through the whole series. In Surah 19, we see the direct relationship between Salat and Sujud. 1958. The Quran tells us about those Allah has blessed, guided, and selected. When the ayat, revelations of Ar-Rahman, are recited to them, they kharru sujjadan wa bukiyan, traditionally translated as fall down, prostrating, and weeping. 1959. But they were succeeded by generations who wasted the Salat and followed their desires. They will meet error, enticement. Observation 1. In part 2, we noticed the word kharra used with ruku as well. We also noted that sujud is an adjective or qualifier of ruku. Today, we will find the answer in Quran if kharra is physical falling or otherwise. Observation 2. It is clear from these ayat that the salat being wasted is described in the prior ayah. Salat is the process of receiving the ayat of Ar-Rahman and subsequently doing kharru, sujjadan wa bukiyan. Observation 3. The phrase فَخَلَفَ مِن بَعْدِهِمْ خَلْفٌ from 1959 is repeated only one more time in the Quran, Surah 7. Please note the stunning interconnectivity of Quran. 7:169. They were succeeded by generations who inherited the kitab, scripture, book, but chose what was presented, the material of this world. Did they not make a covenant to uphold the kitab? 7:170. Those who adhere to the book and establish salat, we will not waste the reward of the reformers. So we clearly see that the salat is directly related to the kitab. Observation 4. In Surah 19, they inherited the salat and wasted the salat. In Surah 7, they inherited the book and abandoned the book. Observation 5. Quran 7:170. Adhered to the book, meaning did not abandon the book. Established the salat, did not waste the salat. Observation 6. Notice the use of the same word in 1959. Wasted the salat, ada'us salat. In 7170, we will not waste nudi'u, the reward of the reformers who established the salat and adhered to the book. In part 4, we had noticed that the ingredients of salat are ayat, ism, zikr, and kalimat of Allah. That is the kitab, Quran. From 1958, we see similar ingredients for sujud, ayat of Ar-Rahman. We will note kharra and bukiya as related concepts. In part 2, we had observed that the rejectors are invited to ruku, but they don't do ruku, acceptance and humility. In part 3, we had observed that the polluted associators are invited to zakat, but they don't attain zakat, purification. In part 4, we note that the hiders are invited to salat, but they make a mockery of it and do not comprehend. We find a similar theme with Sujud, Quran 84:20. What is the matter with them that they do not believe? And when the Quran is read to them, وَإِذَا قُرِيَ عَلَيْهِمُ الْقُرْآنُ لَا يَسْجُدُونَ, they do not do sujud. In fact, those who disbelieved are rejecting. So we make observations. Sajada is an opposing concept to kazzaba, rejecting, because those who kazzaba don't do sajada. Kazzaba and kafara are aligned concepts. Sajada and amana are aligned concepts. From part 2, we remember that raka'ah is an opposing concept to kazzaba, which makes raka'ah an aligning concept to sajada, which makes sense because sajada is an adjective of raka'ah. We will add Quran as an ingredient for sujood from these ayat. In 2560, we see the second example of people invited to sujood to Ar-Rahman, but they don't do it. Remember, Surah 55 Ar-Rahman, Allama al-Quran. So again, sujood is related to Quran and ayat. However, we are faced with a question. Let's suppose for a minute that sujood is a physical step, prostration, in the physical mandatory ritual salat for an adult Muslim. Why is a rejecter expected to do a physical prostration? And why is a disbeliever, hider of truth, attending a ritual salat in the first place? Does he go along all the way to the physical ruku and then refuses to do the physical sujud? In 555, we had noticed the use of circumstantial particle that implied they do salat and zakat while in the state of ruku. We notice a similar theme in Quran 3:113. There are some among the people of the book who are upright, who recite Allah's revelations during the night while they are in the state of sujood. This makes sense because we had noted in part 2 that sujud is an adjective of ruku. Question. Are the Ahl Kitab doing this physical prostration? And are they reciting ayat while doing this physical prostration? Why does the tradition, hadith, prohibit reciting ayat in sujud when the Quran is praising it? The very next ayah tells us what the people of the book do as a result of their sujud. They believe in Allah and the last day and advocate righteousness and forbid evil and are quick to do good deeds. These are among the reformers, Salihin. We remember from 7170 those who adhere to the scripture and establish Salat, we will not waste the reward of the reformers, Muslihin. So the Ahl Kitab in 3113 are essentially doing Salat. This makes sense because the Quran contains a repeating phrase, Allazina amanu wa amilus salihat. Those who believe are at peace with and do works of reform. From the above ayat we derive that salaha or works of reform is a result or product of ayat, kitab, salat and sujud. In 258, Bani Israel are given an instruction to enter a qarya, dwelling, to consume from it, and enter the bab, gate, while sujjadan. Traditional translations have difficulty with this ayah that is repeated 3 times in the Quran. وَادْخُلُوا الْبَابَ سُجَّدًا. Mustafa Khattab. Enter the gate with humility. Sahih International. And enter the gate bowing humbly. Hilalian Khan. And enter the gate in prostration or bowing with humility. Question. Are Bani Israel commanded to enter the Bab while in a physical ruku or physical sujud or just internal humility? In Surah 17, a Quran which we unfolded gradually, that you may recite to the people over time, and we revealed it in stages. 17:107. Those who were given knowledge before it, when it is recited to them, they fall to their chins in sujud. يَخِرُّونَ لِلْأَذْقَانِ سُجَّدًا. Then a repetition in 17:109, and they fall to their chins weeping, and it adds to their humility. 17:110. Say, call upon Allah or call upon Ar-Rahman, and be neither loud in your salat nor silent in it, but follow a course in between. We had seen in Surah 19 that salat was defined as ayat, kharru, sujjadan, wa bukiyan. We see a repeat in Surah 17. Salat is described as calling upon Allah, receiving the ayat, Quran, and falling to chins in sujud. However, we are faced with another question. When we think about the traditional physical prostration, what is the first thing that comes to mind? The forehead upon the ground. Why does the ayah mention the chin when it doesn't even touch the ground? Let's review the Quran for facial anatomy. The Quran mentions words for the ear, nose, eye, cheek, lips, teeth, mouth, tongue, neck, face, and head. Specifically for the forehead area, the Quran uses three distinct words. The temples or sides of the forehead are mentioned as jabeen. The hair right on top front of the forehead are mentioned as nasiya. The front white part of the forehead is mentioned as jabha. All this vocabulary and terminology in Quran, but when it comes to sujud, the Quran mentions the chin. In 26:218, Allazi yaraka hina taqoom, he who sees you when you rise or establish. وَتَقَلُّبَكَ فِي السَّاجِدِينَ. This has been a difficult ayah for translators as well. Your devotions and movements along with those who fall prostrate. Let's take a look at the word taqalluba. It carries the meaning of alternating, going back and forth, turning over and over, examining and checking carefully. A literal translation could be, and your alternation, going back and forth, thoroughly examining between those who are doing sujud. Question. Isn't the Imam, leader, supposed to be in the front doing sujud himself? So what is he examining and alternating among the sajideen? So far, we have made observations and identified several questions around the concept of sujud in Quran. We will now move towards observations and answers from the Quran. Let's do some root analysis and correlations with other roots that look or sound similar. The traditional meanings of sujud in Quran are prostration, bow down, and humility. We will put the traditional meanings to the side for now. Let's look at a similar root, sajara, which carries the meaning of pouring water, caused to overflow, swell, filled with water, cistern to catch rainwater. Another root, sajala, also means pouring continuously, bucket full of water, documenting, noting down on a parchment or scroll. Lexicons mention a phrase, sajal al-Quran, which means read, write, or study the Quran continuously. So let's get back to sajada. It also carries the meaning of incline, absorb, get inflated, and swell. Let's look at another root, majada, to become, to possess, characterized by, satiate. We know from Quran, wal Quranil Majid, an oath by the Quran, the possessor of glory. So what is the common theme here? Complete absorption, saturation to overflow, taking detailed notes on a scroll or on the pages of one's heart, becoming and embodying. The messenger was in complete sujud, absorption to the Quran Majid. He had become characterized by a walking Quran. One cannot be completely absorbing the Quran Majid unless they are already in the state of humility towards Allah. Sujud is an adjective of ruku. We see a repeated mention and a metaphor of water and absorption here. So let's do a quick analysis in the Quran. In Surah 72, a band of jinn hear the Quran and are mesmerized by it. They heard the guidance and believed in it. They mention that some of them are Muslimun, submitters, and others are Qasitun, unjust and deviators from the right path, Rashada. We notice in 72:16, had they established upon the path, we would have given them abundant water to drink, ma'an ghadaqa. What kind of water are we talking about here that is given on the right path? This is the water, rain, fountain of guidance. And it is abundant so they can completely saturate in it. Please note, istaqamu ala tariqa, establish upon the path. Tariqa is also a process, method, journey. And aqimus salat, establish the salat, process. There are many ayahs in the Quran around the similarities between divine water and divine guidance, but we will take a quick look at a few of them. We note that both water and guidance are sent down, nazzala. Both are pure or purifying, mutahhara, blessed, full of blessing, mubaraka, and fortifying or making firm, yusabbita. In 41:39, the Quran mentions the land, earth, as khashi'a, humble or still and dry. But when water is sent down upon it, it stirs, shakes, and grows, swells. That's how Allah revives the dead. In 8:2, the Quran mentions the believers whose hearts tremble, shake, when the zikr of Allah is mentioned. And when they hear the ayat, they increase, grow in faith. So we note the similarity. The divine water shakes the earth and grows, swells it. The zikr of Allah and ayat shake the hearts and increases, grows its faith. But we should remember that the human being is made out of teen, soil, earth, salsal, dried clay, hama'in masnoon, molded mud. So just like the divine water revives a dead earth, the divine guidance revives a dead heart. We are made of earth after all. Let's connect this concept with Salat. In Surah 23, the Quran tells us the attributes of mu'minun. Successful are the believers. 23:2. Those who are khashi'un in their salat. This is commonly translated as humble, submissive. But as we just noted on the previous slide, it also means dry. We have to come dry to the salat. We have to empty our cup of preconceived notions. We have to be dry and ready to absorb, to achieve full sujud. In 17:109, for sujud we had noted, and they fall to their chins, weeping, and it adds to their khushu'. What a beautiful imagery. They come humble and dry to salat. They absorb and saturate completely. They overflow or weep, which makes more capacity in them to absorb more. 23:3. Those who avoid laghv, nonsense talk. Why? Because they are thirsty for the divine ma, the guidance, the ayat of Allah. They don't want other nonsense stories. In contrast, we see in 41:26, those who disbelieve say, do not listen to this Quran, walghaw fih, and talk nonsense over it. Every ayah is an essential piece in this divine guidance. 23:4. Those who are actively engaged in works for zakat, purification, achieving full potential. Because that's the overall goal. Keep purifying and growing with the divine ma. Remember that zakat is a plant grown with watering and pruning till it bears fruit. We have to prune or cut the love out. Let's get back to 15:26. The human being is created from salsal, dried clay that makes a sound. It comes from the root sad lam or sal. There is an Arabic phrase, Salat al-Ibl, which means a camel makes a rumbling sound while drinking water because its intestines are dry or empty. Isn't this interesting? Now let's connect the dots. Salawa is the root for salat. Aqimus salat. Establish the salat process so you can absorb the divine water in sujud to achieve zakat. 23:3 Allazina hum fi salatihim khashi'un. Those who are humble and dry in their salat. In Surah 25, the Quran tells us the attributes of Ibad ar-Rahman, the servants of ar-Rahman. 25:63 The servants of ar-Rahman are those who walk the earth in humility, and when the ignorant address them, they say, Salam. Why? Because they do not want to absorb from the ignorant. So what do they do instead? 25:64 And who spend the night in sujud to their Lord and establishing qiyaman, because they want to absorb knowledge, haqq, from their Rabb in sujud. Moreover, 25:72 Who do not witness falsehood, lies, and when they come across nonsense speech, love, they pass by with dignity. Why? Because they do not want to consume nonsense or falsehood. They want to absorb the Quran. In contrast, the Kafirin do not want to hear the Quran and they make nonsense love over it. Question: Do we see gatherings today where the discussions are focused on stories parallel to and over the Quran? Finally, this brings us to the ayah that will clarify the nature of kharra, falling, both with ruku and sujud. Let's pay attention to 25:73. When reminded of the revelations, ayat of their Lord, lam yakhirru, do not fall, alayha, over them, summan wa umyanan, deaf and blind. The Quran explains itself. Let's compare it to 17:107. Iza yutla alayhim, when it is recited to them, yakhirruna, they fall, lil azqani sujjadan, to their chins in sujud. So are they physically falling? The usage of fall is figurative. When ayat are mentioned, do not fall on them deaf and blind, which means listen carefully, pay attention, absorb, and witness the insights within them. So we note that summan wa umyanan is an opposing concept to lil azqan sujjadan. We read about Kafirin in 18:101, those whose eyes were covered away from my remembrance, metaphorically blind, and they were unable to hear, metaphorically deaf. May we not be from the deaf and blind. However, we are still left with the mystery of the chin. We have to take a step back to understand falling to the chin. Let's take a look at how the mu'minun perform their salat, which we will call the do's of salat. 23:9 وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ عَلَى صَلَاتِهِمْ يُحَافِظُونَ And those who are guardians over their salat. Yuhafizun means heedful, carefully watching, preserving, upholding, and memorizing. 70:23 Allazina hum ala salatihim da'imun. Those who are constant and persistent, lifelong over their salat. 23:2 khashi'un. Those who are humble, submissive, and dry in their salat. Let's see the don'ts of salat. 107:5 Allazina hum an salatihim sahun. Those who are heedless about their salat. Sahun means negligent, inattentive, making omissions. 21:42 Zikr Rabbihim mu'ridun, but they turn away from the zikr of their Rabb in rejection, arrogance. 10:7 Ayatina ghafilun, and those who are oblivious, careless, negligent, inattentive about our revelations and signs. In 7204, we notice a command. When the Quran is recited, listen to it and pay attention. Be silent. 7206. Those who are with your Lord are not proud, arrogant, and to Him they are in sujud. So arrogance is an opposing concept to sujud. We see this repeated in 32:15 and 16:49. إِذَا ذُكِّرُوا بِهَا خَرُّوا سُجَّدًا. When reminded of ayat, fall down in sujud. وَهُمْ لَا يَسْتَكْبِرُونَ. And are not proud or arrogant. We cannot be in sujud if we are in arrogance. So with that background, let's get back to the issue of chin. In 68:42, the Quran tells us of a day when a group of people will be invited to do sujood, but they will not be able to. Why? The next ayah has a clue. They were invited to sujood before as well, while they were intact, whole, and unharmed. Wahum salimun. And what did they do when they were intact? 68:44. So leave me with those who reject this hadith, this Quran. So they rejected the Quran when they could have done sujood. As we saw in 84:21, وَإِذَا قُرِيَ عَلَيْهِمُ الْقُرْآنُ لَا يَسْجُدُونَ. But now they are not intact, which makes us curious. What has happened to them? Let's go to Surah Yasin. Yasin wal Quran al Hakim. 36:8. We placed shackles around their necks. فَهِيَ إِلَى الْأَذْقَانِ. Up to their chins. فَهُمْ مُقْمَهُونَ. So they are stiff-necked. Like a person with a neck brace. His neck is straight and stiff. His chin is raised up. Let's take a physical, metaphorical, and figurative view of the chin. A person with a neck brace can probably put his head or forehead on the ground. What can he not do? He cannot put his chin down. Earlier we saw that sujud is an opposing concept of yastakbirun or arrogance. Arrogance is usually indicated with a stiff neck and a raised up chin. When the Quran is recited to them, they don't do sujud. As we know, sujud is an adjective of ruku, so the arrogance is also opposing ruku, which is accepting one's weakness or mistake, humbling self to Allah, and changing direction to Allah. So let's focus on sujud. Physically, what is the neck-chin position of a person absorbed in a book or consuming content? Usually a bent neck and a fallen chin. However, we noticed earlier that kharru is a figurative or metaphorical falling. Let's see a phrase in English. He is in it up to his chin, which means he is overwhelmed by a task. However, a similar phrasing in Arabic, غَرَقَ فِي عَمَلِهِ حَتَّى زَقَنَهُ, immersed in his task till his chin, which means completely and fully absorbed and focused. Which is exactly what sujud is. Complete absorption. Taking detailed notes. When ayat are mentioned, do not fall on them deaf and blind. Fall to your chins in sujud, completely and fully focused. Let's revisit 7204. When the Quran is recited, listen to it. Ansitu. And pay attention, be silent. In 343, O Maryam, uqnuti, be devoted to your Lord, be silent, and do sujud. Please note that nasata and qanata carry a common meaning of silence. So we focus on Quran in spiritual silence and let the ayat be revealed to us. This brings us to a seemingly difficult ayah which has now been clarified by the Quran. وَتَقَلُّبَكَ فِي السَّاجِدِينَ. And your alternation, going back and forth, thoroughly examining between those who are doing sujud. So what is happening here? The Quran is getting revealed in stages, portions. The portions have to be cross-referenced with past portions. They have to be assimilated, absorbed, pondered over, noted down, and memorized. The Rasul is going back and forth among the Sajideen in his presence day after day, thoroughly examining their progress and assuring that he has properly and clearly communicated and fulfilled a monumentous task assigned to him. Quran 36:16. They said, "Our Lord knows that we are messengers to you. وَمَا عَلَيْنَا إِلَّا الْبَلَاغُ الْمُبِينُ." And our duty is nothing but clear communication. Let's summarize our observations and what we have absorbed so far. Sujud is fully absorbing the divine guidance. Sujud is carefully examining and understanding the ayat. Sujud is obeying Allah and reforming based on the gained knowledge. Sujud requires the state of ruku, acceptance and humility. Sujud requires emptying the cup, a dry state, so pure ma can be received. Sujud requires spiritual silence and stillness. We have more ayat on Salat and Sujud to examine in future parts. This is a long journey and we are committed to it. Please note that the presentations in this series are just my observations in Quran. Anything good in here is from our Rabb. Any mistakes here are mine. Thank you for listening. Salaamun Alaikum.